Hi, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White, founder of the Bobby White Foundation, along with...
Your co-host, Bonnie Snyder.
Okay. And we have a special guest with us today, Jennifer Mitchell from Ian's Way, another local organization here in our community. So we're going to introduce her and what their organization does in the community here in a second. But first, we want to, of course, thank John, Rob, Cage, and Dylan from WeBeam TV for helping us out here, and we wouldn't be here without them. And our new sponsor, the Hilton Garden Inn Tampa, which is actually in Lutz at 54 on the Suncoast. And they actually have put down a challenge to come on board with them to sponsor our show. So I'm getting kind of discombobulated.
No, I mean other ways that you can support the show.
Oh yeah.
We have our kindness page. You can donate there. It has different levels. I'm going to see if I can do this as well as you do,
Yeah,
Tammy.
let's see if you can do it.
No, I think I can. But yeah, our kindness page, you see it there. It has different levels that you can donate to support, the show. Every little bit helps. You can do $5 up to, hey, if you want to sponsor us for a year and do the 25,000, please do so. But, whatever you're comfortable with, because this is, it's a good cause, and it is to highlight, a topic that's important. Yeah,
Exactly.
Very important. How'd I do, Tam?
You did excellent. Actually, you probably did better than I do.
I don't know about that, but...
We also have our T-shirts also, and we have two designs now. We have our original design that was kind of for our Purple Folder program to highlight that, and then our new design that's a little bit more reminiscent of the foundation logo, but still sends the same message of hope.
Well, and I like the way the new shirt. To me, when I see the new shirt, I think that's that more show for the show.
Yeah,
like to me, the original sign is more foundation. The new logo is more the show.
Yeah,
that's how I look. At least that's how they look to me.
Yeah, no, it does. You're right. So yeah, so that's really cool. So we got all those, and then too we have Art for Hope going on all month, and we just had a fundraiser last week.
We did.
And it was at Painting with a Twist in Trinity. And we did Painting with a Purpose. And we actually brought in some of the paintings today.
We did.
So, where's yours?
I have 3 with me today because because I have 3. Well, no, I will show you, the 3 that I have. But like Tony said, this was, just an amazing event that, we put on that, Tim put together for the foundation where, a bunch of us got together at this art studio. And I was like, some of us, like myself, I tell them, I was like, I'm not an artist. But the painting that we did had a lot of symbolism. We did, it was called it's called Neon Butterfly, or Dragonfly. I always say butterfly, Dragonfly. And, many of you may or may not know, that the dragonfly has a lot of symbolism, as it comes to loss. And so as I was going, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm just getting back from vacation. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do tonight? Oh yeah, that's right. I'm supposed to be in the studio painting tonight. So my sister, who was visiting, here, she actually came in to babysit for my daughter while we went on vacation, which was like amazing. I love her. She's at my mom's now.
Yeah, because she had to babysit how many kids?
8.
Oh,
she had 8. Yeah. And I can say that now. Like, she was here in studio, and I had to be like, Mom, because my mom didn't know that she was here. And so when she left here, she went to go visit our mom. Well, she's with my mom now, so the cat's out of the bag. I can say it out. I can say it out loud now. And then I don't do labels, but my Fweety was here, and so I looked at them both, and I was like, "You guys are going painting with me," and so this is Gregory's. I call him Gregory.
Gregory.
All right, yeah. All right. So to the rest of the world, this is Greg's. So this one was painted by Greg. His stage name is Greg Raven. He's a mentalist. And I'm biased anyway. But this is Greg's. I'm very biased to him. This one was done by my sister. And Claudia is an artist. You know, she is, she's the artist in our family. I was like, really liked hers. And, you know, I was being very comical about my own, but I'll make sure which way is upside, which is, yeah, that's, which is upside right. And this one is the one I did.
Well, yeah, because you're notorious for hanging pictures upside down.
You know, and I have a picture of, so Jennifer, what she's talking about, notorious for hanging pictures upside down. As we were doing, you know, fundraising for the foundation, a local artist painted this. It's a beautiful print. As a matter of fact, I have it. I took a picture of it hanging. I don't know if Rob can find it and put it up for us. But she had, it was called Hope Rains Down. And so we had it here in studio, or, you know, the old studio. And, you know, I was like, I'm bidding on this. Like, if nobody else buys it, it's coming in my house. Well, the way she painted it, you know, it's got like there it is. Okay.
And it's the way you hung it.
That's the way I hung it. When the artist painted it, she actually, you know, if you turn it the other way where the dark blue is up top, but something about Greg was at the house, and I'm like, I've got to hang this painting up, and he was like, I got it. So he hung it the way the artist painted it. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, it looks upside down. And, you know, and I was like, Greg, there's sawtooth, you know, he was like, that's the way I hung it. And I'm like, but it looks, can you get back on the ladder and turn it upside down for me, please? So, you know, thankfully, I'm, you know, glad he likes me just a little bit. Joke there. But anyway, you know, so he was like, okay, you know, he was like, whatever you want. That's my guy. He climbs up on this ladder, turns it upside, and I was like, you know what? I like it upside down for some reason. And, you know, Tammy was saying, you know, I'm sure if I found, you know, we talked to the artist and, you know, told her, this is why I hung your painting upside down. I'm sure she'll be fine with it. But yeah, I do hang things upside down. Just because.
And this is mine. And I was going to frame it, but I knew yours weren't going to be framed. So I'm going to get it framed and or frame it. And I've already picked it out. Just haven't had time to do it. But it was a really fun evening, and we raised some money. And I mean, everybody had so much fun that they want to do it again. So you missed the meeting last night on Zoom, but there was only a couple of us on there. So we were talking about possibly doing the lake one with the heart.
Oh, okay.
You know, I think that was like the second one as we voted. Possibly doing it in April.
Okay.
That it's the anniversary of when Bobby died and when Teresa's son Tristan.
Okay.
So, and it's right before Mental Health Awareness Month. So I think maybe that we'll do another one, and this time take over both of those rooms. I mean, beer, wine, and pizza was really good, and painting. So,
in that order. Actually, no. For me, it would be wine, pizza, beer, and then painting, or wine, painting, beer, you know, pizza, beer, or something like that.
Well, and two, we also we had one of our gals and her two daughters paint with us via Zoom.
Yes.
And that was so cool, because we really wanted to be able to extend this to people that either didn't feel comfortable being in the studio, which we had, you know, several of those, or people that lived out of state to be able to do it. So it was kind of like a test run for it, and they had a blast.
But you know,
it was really cool.
And I think for me, one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about the evening is the artist who was taking us through the event. Her name was Ivy.
Ivy, she was a hoot.
She was hilarious, and it's like, I know I'm not going to do her justice, but as she's, you know, painting, you know, she's like, there was a period of time where, you know, she'd be talking a little country twang. Okay, now if y'all want to do a little bit over here, and then she, you know, then like at another moment when she's telling us something else, she was like a little saucy, and I'm like, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not an artist, but she's making this so fun.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this doesn't look good. And she'll go like, no, this is amazing. But yeah, guys, if you've never done painting with a twist, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it was fun, and like I said, everybody that participated that night, it was like, oh, we got to do this again. So we're going to plan another fundraiser doing that. So that was a lot of fun. So we did that, and then last week we had spoke about a couple of the events that we were at, and the Stomp Out Suicide 5K. Rob, do you have those pictures? We had them last week, but he didn't know. This one was actually at Gill Dogs. This one was the red, white, and back the blue event. That was the second event of that day. And then, and that's our volunteers from our committee, Margie and Maria, that helped me, because they had to come out and set up at this event while I was still at the other event in Dade City. At this one.
That's our Dade City event.
That's our Dade City event. And this is actually where Jennifer was at with Ian's Way at that event also, and we were right beside each other. So that was really cool.
You know, and I was thinking to get with Kim and say, hey, can you put me next to Tammy? Because I was actually there. I was doing I think you saw me doing the ping pong, because I was like over representing who I work for, you know, it's like my other job. And then I'd come over to the foundation table and kind of chit chat for a while, and then run back over to my, my table for. But yeah, that was a fun night.
It was a really good event for the first time. And so this is where I want to introduce you all again to Jennifer from Ian's Way. And could you tell us, you started Ian's Way, what, a couple of years ago? About a year?
It was September of 2019
Okay.
that we started.
Okay. And as much as you feel comfortable, can you tell us why you started Ian's Way?
Yes.
And what it's for?
Okay. So we started Ian's Way because my son took his life on August 14th of 2019. And at his memorial, I had lots of kids come up to me and say how my son helped them in their time of need. But at the same time, nobody was able to help my son. So we were thinking, oh, well, peer-to-peer works in group settings and stuff, so let's create a safer environment. And we created Ian's Way so we can do teen group counseling. And our services are free to the public, and we also, of course, haven't done it in a while though, been so busy. We also periodically will do additional Zoom meetings, and that will be for everyone. And we just try to talk, basically, just bring up suicide, bring up mental health, all the things that people do not want to talk about.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the world we live in now, and it's true. I was actually watching what was it? Barack Obama was on with Bruce Springsteen. There was an interview, I think, with Willie Geist. Was that the one? What was it?
I don't remember the other ones, but
It was this weekend, and Barack Obama, I wrote down this quote that he made a comment, and it was in reference to something else, but it was so poignant for what we all do, is sunshine is the disinfectant. And he means bringing it out and talking about it. And as soon as he said that, I was just like, oh my gosh, I got to write this down. And it's so true, and it rings true with so many things, but I just thought it was very poignant for what we do, because nobody likes to talk about it, you know?
And I think a lot of the reluctance to talk about it, for me, I look at it as it's a bit multifaceted. You have, those of us that have been affected by a loss. It's like, some of us, I kind of won't. I will, but I won't put myself. I'm going to put 2 feet on one side, each side of this. people are going to get tired of hearing me talk about this, and it's like,
Right.
but I have to talk about it. This was my child. This was my, and when I heard you say, when you lost your Ian, I had to take a step back. I was like, oh, that's 3 days after I lost my Patrick, but, it's like, we look at it, it's like, are people going to get tired of hearing us talk about it? But then in our minds, it's like, I have to talk about it because this is how we, process, this is how we see ourselves through. But then you have, the people on the other side who I'm afraid to say something because I don't want to upset the person. Like we've shared on the show a couple of times, I had a family member look at me and said, okay, look, he's gone. You have other children. Get over it. What? Like what? And then, you have people who, I guess it's kind of like if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. But then if you have somebody who is contemplated, there's that fear, well, you don't talk to them about it because you're going to give them the idea. And it's like, that's not the case either. But in talking about this, Jennifer, if you would please tell us about your Ian. Tell us about your Ian.
Yeah,
We have tissues. It's okay.
My Ian, he was so bright. He was in high school when he took his life. He was 16, about ready to go into his, actually it was one day before going into his junior year of high school, right before it started. But he was just so bright, and I never imagined anything like that would happen. He was on the swim team, he was in all honors classes, wonderful grades and everything. He active, and everything, had friends, and everything appeared to be okay, and going well, and then I guess it wasn't. But the sad part is there were some signs, and if I had only known that that was actually a sign, and I go back to maybe I could have done something. But the point is I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. So what's important is to make sure that the parents know what I don't know, so other parents do not have to live my nightmare.
That's true, and we talk about that. We've talked about that a lot over the almost past year.
We did. We had, as a guest on the show, my son Patrick and I still call her my daughter-in-law. They're both remarried to alternate people, but I still claim her. And Kira, which is my grandson's, I lost my grandson first. But, I had my oldest son and his ex-wife on the show one time. And, to what you were saying, if I look at myself, or I'm going to pull myself into this, also as, I am a mental health professional. We go through the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, and and we're like, we say that's distorted thinking. Stop. But I want to say it was Carl, my son. To your point, where you were like, I don't want parents to go through. And what if I'd done? Do you remember when Carl said, would I have if I would have prevented it, or if we could have, would we have just prevented it for that day? Mm-hmm. Would it have been, would we have another week with him? Would we have another year from him? Did we, would we have just stopped inevitably what was going to happen? And then, like the same thing, as we're talking to, Kira, she was one that found him. He died at home. Same. She was like, it was a normal night. Like they ate dinner. He's going up to bed. Hi, how you doing? Or, good night, good night, love you. And, Tammy and I on the show, we had, we've highlighted a couple of books. And in the books, we talked about, loss survivors, bills of rights and everything. And one of the things that we, talked about was, like anger and processing, and what is that process? Again, if you're, not wanting to put you on the spot, so, again, whatever you're comfortable with, but what has that process been for you in, my child is gone, up to, now you're running this, foundation that,
And Ian was your only son,
Yes,
right? He was
Ian
your
was
only
my
child.
only child,
Right.
and it's actually been drastic. I mean, going from an identity as a mom to now a bereaved mom, and where I had a child in school, and it's like I had all these things that I would do. I would go to all his events, swim meets, and everything. And it just stops. That is hard. It's like when everything just stops. And it's like, what do you do? What do you do after that point? And, excuse me, I'm going to need those tissues.
That's why we have them.
Oops. So, I mean, like when you're thinking about what do you do after that point, it's like you now realize that your life is just different. And, but it's a drastic difference. And it put me into, I want to say a bubble, where it was like, I didn't know if I was coming and going, if it was day or night. And I stayed in bed for a long time, for a while. I'd get up and do things that I could do. And there were times where I couldn't do anything. I couldn't function. My brain just mentally couldn't function. And I would have to say, I was that way probably for almost a year. And,
That's
now.
very common.
Yes. And now, even though I'm little over 2 years after his death, I'm still working on trying to get my life, in some kind of order. I still look back on my son and everything. Like in my room, I have a bunch of pictures. I have one wall dedicated to him. I have his urn still right next to my bed.
I have Bobby's right on his nightstand.
and Patrick's is in my living room. I have a pot shelf in my living room, and Patrick is right there on the pot. It's like there's a shrine.
There's the shrine.
You would think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that is a common theme with us, and I think Kira has Aiden's urn.
Yeah. So that's pretty much been the tough part, is how everything just stopped. And then I went through this thought, like, I know it sounds really bad to wish your child had a baby as a teenager, but I really did. I went through this period where I was like, I'm never going to be a grandma. And I'm like, oh, I wish I'm like, why didn't he get a girl pregnant in high school? Which is awful thinking. But at the same time, I'm just like, I wanted that.
It's all part of the losses that you're
Yes.
feeling.
Well, and when I hear you say that's awful thinking, for me, as I sit back and process it, it makes perfect sense, because it's like, under normal circumstances, it's like, do we want our teenage children to be teenage parents? And I mean, and I'm going to make some clarification here as I say this, because my children watch this show. My children, my oldest and my daughter, my two oldest kids, had children, very young. So just make sure they understand I'm not slamming y'all. I love, thank you for the grandchildren. So that's why they call me Nana. We don't do gene,
Thank you for the million grandchildren.
Yeah, there's 20. You can borrow one of mine. I have 23. Just saying, but I see that as normal. Because it is part of that process of I don't have my child anymore, or my child's not here physically. I need something physically, like. Do you feel like robbed? I think like I'm robbed of this ability to become like I wanted to be grandma.
You are robbed. You really do, because, I mean, throughout your entire life, you're projecting for these futures. And unfortunately, my son's future just isn't going to happen. And I could tell you, last year, graduating school year, which technically is June of this year, my son was supposed to graduate high school. And so that was a milestone that it hurt. It really, really hurt. And then the idea that I'm not going to be able to take my son to see different college campuses and stuff like that, that hurt.
Was he driving yet?
Huh?
Did he have his driver's license yet?
Yes.
Okay.
He had his drive. Oh, that's one thing I love, and I'm so grateful for those memories. His dad loved him very much, but I would have to say that I got to do a lot of that stuff. I got to teach him how to drive and everything, and as scary as it was, it was like amazing, because when I get in the car, sometimes I still have my son's school badge, hanging from my rear view mirror. So every time I get in the car, I think about him, and especially teaching him how to drive and everything. That was kind of fun and scary at the same time. And it was just one of those proud moments.
I love the fact, it's bittersweet. I say there's that bittersweetness when we have, the memories of what they were, and of course we're mourning the fact that they're not here, and what are the could-haves, Aiden, my grandson Aiden I think he'd be a couple of years younger than your Ian. But yeah, it's like, would this have been his graduating year?
Yeah, I remember you had one graduating
14,
ahead of
15,
him
16.
and then him, I think. I mean, didn't you have him like right in a row?
He'd have been a sophomore, junior this year. I think so. Because if he was 14 and 19, he'd have been 16 now.
Yeah, so he'd probably be
Sophomore, junior.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah. So it's
So-
a couple more years.
I know you said that Ian's Way was created, to honor, your son. What was that process like, setting up the foundation?
That process, actually, my mother, Ian's grandmother, started it. She had asked me almost like right after it happened, do you want to have a foundation after Ian? I was like, okay, yes. And I didn't even think anything of it, I'm just like, okay, yeah, let me go ahead and do this. And I never realized how much work it was going to be. And not, especially being a newly bereaved mom, it like took every ounce I had to even work on it. And there were times where, like, our website, we didn't have it up for months and months and months, because it meant that I had to go through pictures and I had to write stuff. And
It's hard, especially when you're still in that very new recent. Yeah.
yes.
I think it was 2.5 years after Bobby died before I started the foundation. I could not have imagined starting it right after he died. There just was no way. I mean, I have a hard time now, let alone trying to do what you and your mother put together so soon after Ian's death.
Yeah, it was really tough. It's still really tough. There's times where I still struggle just to have to, work on Ian's Way and everything. But at the same time, I feel grateful because I have spoken to many people, and they're just, and this could be including a few teens, and they like the program. So I'm just happy that we have it. That way, if somebody if a teenager is upset, they have a place to go and talk about it. And that you don't have to be suicidal to talk, go into our program or anything. Just we want to be able to give our kids tools and resources of how to handle life. And the goal is, honestly, is to hope as they get older that they'll be able to utilize everything that they do learn.
I was on one of the Zooms with you. I remember that, and I don't know if you remember it. There was a young gal that was on there that told her story. It was very poignant. She was so good the way she articulated her feelings and what she had been going through and dealing with, and being able to, I mean, granted we were on Zoom, but even still, she was sharing in front of total strangers, and just, I mean, you could feel her. It was amazing.
Yeah, I met her in an online support group, and we just wound up taking our conversation on the side. And next thing I know, I'm like, "You have a very interesting story. Do you mind, presenting on Ian's Way?" And she said, "Sure." So I like to do stuff like that. We've had it was for everybody, all ages. We had also a presenter how alcohol addiction actually caused his suicidal ideations, and then after he quit drinking, he started to love life. So I thought that was a very important message out there, especially when this individual, I think he said he tried a few times, and obviously he must have had an angel or something on his shoulder because he managed to live, which is wonderful because now he can help other people and share his story. And he did that night because we did have somebody on our news feed saying, "Thank you, that's exactly what I needed to hear." So I don't know who that person is, don't remember, but I'm grateful that we were able to provide that service for them.
Well, and that's a thing. One of the things about what we do with our organizations is we touch people when we don't even know. Most of the time, we're not going to know. It happened with us too. The last Art for Hope in-person event that we were able to have, and a woman came to our event. She saw our flyer at a dress shop and came with a friend of hers, not knowing her friend knew me, and my friend called me the next day, and she said, "Tammy, you are not going to believe what happened." And she was in shock herself because she had no idea. And on the drive home, this woman told her that she had been planning on taking her life, but after being at our event and listening to our speakers, she decided she wasn't going to do it. And so we immediately, you need to talk to your son. We got her a purple folder, and she's doing great today. But a lot of times, we don't know who we're going to touch, and that's why we need to keep doing this as hard as it is for us and for others to hear. But it does. I mean,
well, I can admit, out of all the times that I have spoken and given my story, it has been helping with my recovery process. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt any less.
no, and
it just hurts different.
Right, and that's just the way it's going to be. But I've said on many occasions, when I'm sure you've experienced too, when often if we go somewhere to speak in front of a group and they find out what we're talking about, if they don't know ahead of time, the expressions on their faces change, the energy in the room changes, because most of them don't want to hear it. But afterwards, every time I have spoken, at least one person, and that's all it takes, one person comes up and either thanks me because it's affected them in some way, or they themselves had at times contemplated. So I'm sure you've experienced the same thing.
I have, in fact.
And especially with the teen side of it.
Well, yes, I have. And then also, I do know, you mentioned like how my process with Ian, there was a moment where I was considering joining him.
That's, from that perspective, again, it's not common, or not uncommon, I should say, because, there is a very high statistic of loss survivors, contemplating, attempting, and completing suicide, and, I have a hard time, doing, qualifying, you as, this was your only child, that, your level of, I want to join my son was here, where, if I'm going to use Kira, my daughter-in-law, for example, she has, I want to make sure I get this right, 3, 4, 3 other children. I'm not leaving a child out. I want to make sure I'm not leaving a child out. But she's 3 other children, 4, besides Aiden. And, I know there was an up and down. His siblings, my other grandchildren, especially his oldest sister and his brother, they, experience the same thing where it's I'm angry with their brother. Some of the language that came out of their mouth, and I'm like, it's okay, I mean, I was like, I understand where I understand what you're processing through, but wanting to join as well, so that's not uncommon.
Yeah, I do know that I wanted to place all my anger on every other thing that I could possibly place it on, other than my son, because I don't want to be mad with with him. That wasn't easy.
I mean, at the same time, it is natural. It is expected. It is, can I use the word, those word normal around a lot. It is normal to be angry at, before I moved here to Florida, I lived in Kansas, and I, did some training with, worked inside a prison. And, I would do, training on, suicide prevention, inside the jail. And one of the things that I talked about, as we're going through this, this grief cycle that we talk about so much, what is this thing called, this grief cycle? And, when we hit that anger stage, who are you angry with? And this is true of any trauma. I'm angry at, myself, because, I should have seen the signs. I'm angry at, the person who's not here anymore. How could you do this to me? I'm angry at, if I use Aiden, for example, there was a lot of anger towards his girlfriend and a couple other friends, because he had sent a picture of himself in his closet just before he completed. So there was a period of time, it's like, why didn't she call anybody? So there was a lot of, anger towards, her. And of course I'm saying, for me, I'm sitting back like, I'm not the family's therapist, but darn it, I'm a therapist. It's like you can't turn that switch off. And so I make it a point to, to look at people and say, it's bad enough that, or it's difficult enough, let me rephrase it. It's difficult enough to deal with the loss in itself. I don't want to say why. I hate the word, we're taught in school, don't use the word why, because it's the whole blame thing. But for lack of a better word, why beat yourself up over an emotion that, you're feeling, or a process that you're going through? Because there is no rule book, there is no manual that says, all right, so when you lost somebody, this is what you're supposed to do. It's like it doesn't exist. And even though there might be some similarities amongst our experiences, Like I heard you say, it was a year. We talk about this when I met Tammy for the first time. I was literally just coming back to work after, I lost my grandson. And Tammy was speaking at one of our coalition meetings. And I walked up to her later on, and afterwards, and I was like, I'm interested in what you're doing. I want to get involved. And, she'd found out, that the loss was recent. She goes, not yet. You're not ready. Or it's too soon. And I just, like I said, our joke between us is, I looked at her and was like, who are you to tell me it's too soon? Like, who does she think she is? Who does she think she is? But at the same time, and like in putting, this show together, this was not I think we're going to do the show. It took a while for this to even happen. And, John, our producer, talked to Tammy. It's like, all right, it's time to do this.
He worked on me for, I don't know, 8 to 10 months. I was like, oh, you really need, and I'm like, I don't want to be in front of the camera. And then it just finally got, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. And he actually, we had a little short conversation earlier, and he was doing another show, and there was another nonprofit on that they were featuring, and she helps people going through cancer with non-medical bills. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you need to do a show. He goes, I have another nonprofit that has a show. And she says, oh, you do? And he says, yeah, I do. And he goes, and I have the hardest one of all. And she's like, you have the hardest one of all? And he says, yeah, it is the hardest one of all. And she's, well, what is it? Hope in the light of suicide. And she's like, oh, yeah, it is. But, we know from our experiences, unfortunately, how important it is.
You have to make it okay, to talk about it. And I think that, we talk about this thing like, the stigma behind suicide and, whether it's, suicide, whether it is substance misuse and whatnot. I remember doing an interview, and being asked the question. and I tell people, I said, you have to take into context the reason why the question was asked. And it was, you are a mental health professional. How did this happen to you? And a lot of people are offended by that. And I say, you can understand why that question was asked. Because it was kind of set up for me prior to, I'm going to ask you a question, I don't want to offend you. But to me, it made sense.
Oh,
because,
most definitely.
I'm sitting back and I'm looking at the three of us, here's the three of us women sitting here. Mm-hmm. And I'm quite sure that where, we have, some, obviously some similarities, I bet you our backgrounds are a little different because we have an artist, okay? We have, I'm mental health, but I'm military, mm-hmm. As well. And we have
a sign language interpreter.
Okay, so it's like, all right, so one argument could say, well, we've got three professional women in totally different fields mm-hmm. linked together by this common thread of, we lost someone, your husband, your son, a son and a grandson, and I'm like,
well, and that's where we've always said, suicide doesn't discriminate.
Mm-mm.
And
precisely.
This exactly shows exactly that. It doesn't discriminate on any level.
Yeah, because we had, Bobby, albeit an adult, we touched on, his MS. Mm-hmm. Then you had, my grandson, your son, teenagers, mm-hmm. And then, my son was in his 30s, but it's like, we got all, we've almost in fact got a dad, a son, a dad, 2 sons, and a grandchild. Mm-hmm. There's 3 generations right there represented by the 3 of us sitting in this.
Well, and when I was in high school, actually, no, I wasn't in high school. When I was probably around 11, I remember, and this was our, I would say, first experience with suicide, but it had been hidden for so many years. we were at a friend's house. All of us kids were playing, probably around, I don't know, 11, 12 years old. And all of a sudden, our parents descend upon us, and we have to go home. And we find out that our friend's uncle had taken his life. And he was in his early 20s at the time. And much like still today, the incident happened, and then nobody ever talked about it ever again. And quite frankly, from that time until we graduated from high school, just about, never even thought about it. Then we graduated from high school. A boy that I graduated with, just a few months after we graduated, went up into the mountains and took his life. And the father of the uncle, my friend's grandfather, right after Kim and I had graduated, I don't know if Kay had, so around a year or two after our high school graduation, their grandfather took his life.
Yeah, it's, well, they definitely say it could be genetic too. If you have a tendency, I don't know, I've heard that, you know, if you have mental health in your family.
Well, and it does, I don't know if it actually has to, possibly.
There's a potential that there could be some predisposition, because I know, you know, and I'm just thinking back, you know, in my studies, you have that whole nature nurture kind of thing, you know, going on. You know, does it, you know, is it prevalent within a family? Which, you know, when we're doing, you know, intake or interviews with people, that we do ask for family history, you know, to kind of look and see, you know, if there might be a, you know, family or what's the word I'm looking for? Familial?
Familiar.
This Jersey tongue doesn't like certain words. But, you know, so we look and see, you know, is there, you know, could there be something genetic? So you're right, you know, I would say the same thing like when you look at, say, like alcoholism or other, you know, things like that. There is the tendency that if you fall into this category, there's a potential that there's a likelihood that you're more at risk for that than this.
Well, and in our case, my brother-in-law, Bobby's older brother, attempted 2 years prior to Bobby, was at the same age that Bobby took his life, but we didn't know about it. The rest of the family knew. I mean, not the whole family, the other siblings, and his wife knew. They didn't tell us. I found out that he attempted 5 months after Bobby.
I had brought that up because I know there was a period of time where I remember watching a TV show. It was on Netflix. It was like 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah,
that was such a controversial
Yeah,
show, but yeah,
I
very.
think I watched it once. I couldn't watch it.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to watch it. I think I watched maybe 1 or 2 episodes, and that was it. However, I remember saying specifically, and I said it to my son, I said, things like that don't happen in our family. But here's the crazy thinking. I don't know why I even possibly thought that, because even my own father tried to take his life at one point in time, and then eventually succeeded with an overdose. So I'm like, why would I think that? And I had tried to do it a few times, and yet here I'm an adult, and I'm like, things like that just don't happen in my family, but they do.
But they do. It's a denial, you know. And I asked my sister-in-law. My brother-in-law was committed to a psych ward for several weeks, and before he was released, I was concerned because I did not know what was going on. Nobody was talking to us about it, so I was concerned. And so I called her and I asked her directly if he would potentially hurt himself. And my answer was, oh no, of course not. Mm-hmm. And then 5 months later, standing in my kitchen on crutches with a broken leg, talking to my sister-in-law, my husband's youngest sister, I flat out asked her again, and she told me the truth.
So, as we're winding down our time, Jennifer, can you tell us what services, and I mean, that's a heck of a way to segue into this, but
Yeah, but
being mindful of time because we, sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, we're almost
we
out
have
of time.
that, plus we have events.
We do.
And including her event.
So if you could just, very quickly tell us what services Ian's Way provides.
Okay, so Ian's Way provides a free group counseling to teenagers. It is done online, so it could be done from their home, and we also have another program where we sometimes periodically will do Zoom sessions and for everybody regardless of age, and that's just to start a conversation and to get the word out there and just let people know, hey, this thing is real, it could happen in any family, and we are offering free group counseling. I do not want money to be a factor in anybody ever receiving help. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
You heard
And-
that, folks. It's free.
Yeah, and,
Yes.
and quite often, the money is a barrier for people to get help. And when we're in this state, especially soon after, that's the last thing you want to think about is, now I have to pay for this? Where am I going to pay for it?
Like, not
so-
only do I have to pay for, the death and all of that
everything
entails,
else, right.
I have to pay for what I need for myself as well. So,
Right. So,
Oh.
and so now you have an event coming up.
I do. On November 13th, we put together a bowl-a-thon. That's what we're calling it. It's going to be at Dunedin Lanes. And we picked Pinellas only because we haven't been very active in Pinellas yet. And I want people and parents to know that we are here for them. So our bowling event, again, is November 13th. It is from 3 to 5. And what will be included is 2 hours of bowling, your shoes, food, and beverage.
And I will be there to volunteer after the Out of the Darkness walk.
Yes.
So that is in the morning of the same day on the 13th. The registration for Out of the Darkness walk, I think, starts at 8.
usually, yeah. 'Cause
And
it's first thing in
then
the
I
morning.
think opening ceremonies are around 9 or so. And that's at Sims Park in Newport Richey. And I just found out, too, this morning, it's going to be another double duty morning. I think it's, what is it? Flyer Rob Partners for Canines. They're having Canine Patriots. What is that?
It's a 5K
Yeah,
can.
it's a 5K at Starkey Park. And that event, I think, starts at 8 o'clock that morning. So I'm going to be there somehow. We're going to be at both events. Kim from 9 Round is going to be at this event. And so now we just have to work out the logistics, because I just found out this morning, I'm like, oh no, everybody's having everything on the same day. So at least yours is in the afternoon, so we can do the morning events and then come down and help out with your event. So I'm excited about doing that too.
And I will be volunteering with your event.
So see, we've said before, and this is why we have people like you on and other organizations. We've had Debbie from NAMI on. With what we're doing, not my organization or not just your organization, we can't all on our own tackle this. It takes all of us. Like with our organization, we focus a lot on lost survivors. Your organization focuses more on teens and teen prevention. I mean, we all have to do our part, because it's way bigger than us.
And what I do is the bridge between I'm just saying, and I hate to use the phrase cradle to grave, but it is, it's like bad pun there, guys, not intentional. But yeah, what I do, it is all encompassing. But you're right, it does indeed take a village, and I think what we're doing, Jennifer, we thank you from the bottom of our heart, for being here and sharing your story about Ian and allowing yourself to be raw for our audience, and for us. And, I'm sure we will continue collaborating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, we will. And, thank you for sharing, everything like we say, it's unscripted, so whatever happens, happens. And just thanks for sharing.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So if you know anybody that may be in crisis, there are the numbers up there on the screen, and please put that National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and any of those others in your cell phone. Have them ready, because you just never know when you might need them. Whenever I go out and talk at organizations, take out your cell phones. You need to do this, and you just don't know.
And as we close it out every time, just remember,
There's
always hope.
So thank you for joining us.